There is a story in the Talmud that most people have never heard. A king offers his servant a reward. The servant can choose between 1,000,000 gold coins paid immediately or a single coin that doubles every day for 30 days. Every person who hears this story for the first time chooses the 1,000,000 coins. It feels larger, it feels safer, it feels real. The servant chose the doubling coin. On day 30, he collected 536 million gold coins. The king had offered the servant a choice between thinking like a poor person and thinking like a wealthy one. And the servant, trained in the ancient Jewish understanding of how numbers grow over time, knew exactly which one to choose. This is not a fairy tale. This is the oldest and most powerful principle in all of Jewish financial philosophy. And today I'm going to show you exactly how it works, where it came from, and how the wealthiest Jewish families on earth have been using it for 3,000 years to turn modest beginnings into generational empires. What the rabbis understood that Einstein supposedly called the eighth wonder. There is a quote often attributed to Albert Einstein, himself a product of Jewish intellectual culture, that compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. He who understands it earns it. He who does not pays it. Whether Einstein actually said those words is debated. But what is not debated is that the principle behind them was understood and practiced by Jewish scholars and merchants long before modern finance gave it a name. The Talmud contains extensive discussion of what happens when money is put to work over time. The rabbis were deeply sophisticated about the mathematics of growth. They understood that small, consistent actions, repeated over long periods of time, produce results that seem miraculous to anyone who has not been watching the process from the beginning. They called this principle in various forms across different texts, but the underlying philosophy was always the same. Time is the most valuable ingredient in any wealth-building formula, and the person who starts earliest, stays most consistent, and never interrupts the process, wins by a margin that eventually becomes incomprehensible to anyone who started late. The three compounding engines Jewish families used. What makes Jewish compounding philosophy different from the modern financial advisor version is that the rabbis did not limit the principle to money alone. They identified three distinct engines of compounding that work simultaneously in the lives of financially successful people, and they built Jewish culture around maximizing all three at once. The first engine is financial compounding. This is the one most people know. Money invested generates returns. Returns reinvested generate more returns. Over time, the growth curve bends upward so sharply that the majority of the final wealth is created in the last few years of the process rather than the first. A person who invests $1,000 a month starting at age 25 and earns 8% annually will have approximately $3.5 million by age 65. A person who waits until age 35 to start the exact same investment will have approximately $1.5 million. Same monthly contribution, same return, 10 years difference, $2 million less. The rabbis did not have these exact numbers, but they understood the principle completely, which is why Jewish culture has always emphasized early deployment of capital, consistent reinvestment of returns, and the absolute prohibition on interrupting the compounding process by pulling money out for consumption. The second engine is knowledge compounding. This is the engine that most financial advisors never talk about, but the rabbis considered it the most powerful of the three. Every piece of knowledge you acquire builds on the knowledge you already have. A person who reads one book about finance understands it at a surface level. A person who reads 100 books about finance starts seeing connections, patterns, and principles that are invisible to the person who read one. A person who reads 1,000 books and spent 30 years applying what they learned operates at a level of understanding that cannot be taught in any classroom. Jewish culture institutionalized knowledge compounding through the practice of Torah study. Every Jewish child was expected to study every day, not just as a religious obligation, but as a daily investment in the compounding of intellectual capability. The rabbis understood that a person who studies consistently for 40 years does not know 40 times more than a person who studied for 1 year. They know 400 times more, because knowledge compounds just like money does. This is why Jewish families produce such extraordinary concentrations of expertise in every field they enter, not because of genetics, but because they have been running a knowledge compounding system for 3,000 years. The third engine is relationship compounding. The third engine is the one that produces the most dramatic results in the shortest time, but requires the longest runway to build. Every genuine relationship you invest in builds on the relationships you already have. A person with one trusted connection has access to one network. A person with 100 trusted connections has access not to 100 networks, but to the combined networks of all 100 people, an exponentially larger pool of opportunity, information, capital, and support. Jewish communities have always understood this. The investment in Shabbat dinners, in synagogue attendance, in community events, in maintaining relationships across decades. These are not social obligations. They are relationship compounding engines. Every connection maintained opens doors to connections that could not have been imagined when the original relationship was formed. The rabbis called this concept chesed, loving kindness. But underneath the spiritual language was a profoundly practical understanding. The person who consistently invests in genuine relationships with good people accumulates a form of social capital that compounds over time just like financial capital does. And at critical moments, when an opportunity appears, when a crisis hits, when a door needs opening, that accumulated social capital produces returns that no financial investment could ever match. The interruption problem, why most people never see the results. Here is the most important and most ignored aspect of compounding that the rabbis understood completely. The process only works if you never interrupt it. This sounds obvious, but it is the single most common reason why people who understand compounding intellectually never experience its results practically. Financial compounding is interrupted every time you pull money out of an investment to fund consumption. Every time you liquidate a position because the market scared you. Every time you spend the returns instead of reinvesting them. Each interruption does not just pause the process, it resets the curve. And every reset means starting again from a lower base with less time remaining. Knowledge compounding is interrupted every time you stop studying, every time you decide you know enough, every time you choose entertainment over education. The rabbis built daily study into Jewish religious practice specifically to prevent this interruption, because they knew that the human tendency to stop learning once basic competence is achieved was the greatest threat to the knowledge compounding process. Relationship compounding is interrupted every time you neglect a connection, every time you fail to show up for someone who needed you, every time you treat a relationship as a transaction rather than a long-term investment. The damage from these interruptions is often invisible in the short term and catastrophic in the long term. The wealthiest Jewish families are not necessarily the ones who found the best investments or had the most knowledge or knew the most people. They are the ones who started all three compounding engines early and then refused to interrupt them for decades, for generations, until the curve bent so sharply upward that the results looked like magic to anyone watching from outside. The Rule of 72, Ancient Wisdom in Modern Numbers. There is a mathematical shortcut called the Rule of 72 that tells you how long it takes for money to double at any given interest rate. Divide 72 by your annual return, and you get the approximate number of years until your investment doubles. At 6%, your money doubles every 12 years. At 8%, your money doubles every 9 years. At 12%, your money doubles every 6 years. At 24%, your money doubles every 3 years. The rabbis did not have this formula, but they had the intuition behind it. They understood that the rate of return matters enormously over long time periods, that a seemingly small difference in annual return, say 6% versus 10%, produces a staggering difference in final outcomes over 30 or 40 years. This is why Jewish wealth culture has always emphasized finding the highest quality deployment of capital rather than simply saving money. A savings account at 2% is not compounding in any meaningful sense. It is slowly losing the race against inflation while creating the psychological comfort of watching a number grow. Real compounding happens in real assets, in businesses that generate genuine returns, in properties that appreciate and produce income simultaneously, in knowledge that opens doors to opportunities unavailable to those without it, in relationships that produce deal flow, partnership opportunities, and access to capital that no public market can provide. Starting late, the honest truth. I want to address something directly because pretending otherwise would be dishonest. If you are reading this at 45 or 50, and you have not been running these three compounding engines consistently since your 20s, you have lost time that cannot be recovered. The mathematics of compounding are brutal in their honesty. Time lost early in the process costs more than any mistake made later. But here is what the rabbis also understood. The second best time to plant a tree is today. A person who starts at 45 and runs all three engines without interruption for 25 years will arrive at 70 with more than they can imagine and more than they would have had if they had started at 45 with the wrong philosophy and the wrong habits. And more importantly, if you have children or will have children or can influence any young person in your life, the most powerful financial decision you can make today is ensuring that they start their three compounding engines as early as possible. Because the compound interest on a financial investment started at 25 versus 45 is significant. But the compound interest on a knowledge investment started at 5 versus 25 is incalculable. This is why Jewish families start the education at age 5. Not because 5-year-olds can manage investment portfolios, but because the knowledge compounding engine started at 5 has 20 years of growth before it needs to produce a single dollar of financial return. By the time a Jewish child raised in this tradition makes their first real financial decision, they are not starting from zero. They are starting from a base of 20 years of compounded knowledge, compounded relationships, and compounded philosophical understanding of how wealth actually works. That is the real compounding secret, not a formula, not a rate of return, not a specific investment strategy, a 20-year head start. What you do starting today. 3 decisions starting now. Deploy whatever capital you have into the highest quality asset you can access, and do not touch it. Do not watch it daily. Do not react to short-term movements. Do not interrupt the process for any reason short of genuine emergency. Set a calendar reminder for 10 years from today, and do not look at the number until that reminder fires. Read for 1 hour every day without exception in your field of wealth building. Not motivational content, not social media. Books, studies, biographies of people who built what you want to build. Do this every day for 10 years, and you will know more about wealth creation than 99% of the people you will ever compete with. Invest in 5 genuine relationships every month. Not networking, not transactional connection. Real investment in people you respect, whose lives you can add value to, and who are operating at the level you aspire to reach. Maintain those relationships across years and decades without expectation of immediate return. And watch what happens to your life in year 10, when every one of those 5 monthly connections has compounded into a network of people who know you, trust you, and want to see you succeed. Start all 3 engines today. Run them without interruption, and give them enough time to do what compound growth always does when it is not interfered with. Produce results that look like miracles to everyone who was not watching from the beginning. Shalom, and may your patience be as long as your ambition.